Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to queue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Julia Mossbridge here with me on the show. Julia is the founder of the Institute for Love and Time, a professor of physics and author of several books, including The Calling, which helps readers engage in their soul's work. Julia, hello there. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, hi, Brandon. Awesome to be here. Yay.
So good to have you here. I had to I always know it's going to be a really good episode when I have to stop us from going down 50 rabbit holes before I even start recording. So it's a good sign. I'm going to start you off with my cliche opening question. And it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I stop the elevator, but I tell her my passion is following my marching orders, which are full of joy and always make me feel more connected to the universe.
My marching orders. I like that. Do you want to expand a little bit on what you mean by marching orders?
Yeah. So that's what I said right now. So each time someone asks me that question, I say whatever is my experience in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
My marching orders are kind of like that. So my marching orders, it's like I wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, I have a new marching order, which is sort of a directive from the universe for the day or for the moment.
Yeah.
Or for that second,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the framing of that as marching orders, because it really is. It's sort of, I always view it as sort of a dance with our higher self between, I kind of like free will and destiny, it's like both are, it's like, is it free will or destiny? Yes. It's like they're both happening simultaneously. And it's sort of like the paradox of existence. And so I think that's a really interesting way to frame it, because there is definitely
we're going to have to get into free will and destiny a little bit later when we talk about the precognition stuff, because that's like one of the key things, Oh, also, by the way, after I stop the elevator, then we decide what floor we're going to get off on, because why should she decide she's going up to the 10th floor? We got something else going on, right? Because she asked me that question.
Right. Well, that's a great point. And the free will and destiny thing, I actually share my perspective on free will and destiny in my book, The Golden Key. And so we'll get into that in a minute. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves before. I do like to start with sort of like some base level backstory. Whatever feels relevant to share. I mean, you're doing some very interesting things in the world. How did you get here? What do you feel like sharing?
Yeah. So this question is, I get this question a lot, and it's motivated by this sort of this idea that things happen in the forward order and that the causes have to be in the past. But in fact, the way I think that physics works and the way that I think that reality works and experience works is that the causes are both in the past and the future. And so while I can tell you about things that have happened in the past, it doesn't necessarily tell the full story of why I am doing the things I'm doing right now, right? Because of course, perhaps about half of, I mean, I'm probably in midlife, we hope. So I'm like 53, right? So I'm imagining I'll live to be 106 or so. So about half of the events that are shaping the present moment are calling from the future, and about half are pulling from the future, and about half are pushing from the past.
Love that.
So in terms of the past, okay, so I'm going to answer your question in a normal way now.
I like the abnormal answer. It definitely resonates.
I figured. Here's the normal way. I grew up pretty abnormally in that I lived in a farmhouse in Libertyville, Illinois, which is sort of, at the time, was kind of like a farming, very rural community. Now it's kind of more of a professional community, like a bedroom community for Chicago, Illinois. And there were not a lot of people around. There was my family, and my family was pretty nuts, messed up in various ways, like many of our families, and also extremely loving. So there was this like thread, I like to call it a golden thread of unconditional love that was always there despite the dysfunction and the abuse and neglect and substance abuse stuff. But there was this golden thread of unconditional love, and that is the sort of thread that I rode through my life. And I found out that I was a really good student, and that I could basically put all my effort into school and be in a place where there were other people and maybe for the most part less dysfunction, but also less love. And so anyway, I was always balancing this sort of academic, analytic sense of self with this creative, partially extremely eccentric, very intellectual family of genius, crazy people. And and so that's kind of that's sort of the thread. That's those two threads: unconditional love and this balance between like creative genius and analysis, that I have been writing my whole life and has helped me engage in the world in a way that's seemingly sane and productive, and at the same time brings in some interesting ideas that are seemingly not sane, but in fact have some validity, like precognition and the capacity to listen to your calling from the future. So that's sort of a esoteric way of answering the question, but kind of normal. And then the more normal way is like, I grew up, I was a good student, I was very scientific, I had some creative impulses. I went to a lot of high-end, tier 1 research universities, got my PhD at Northwestern, and then did a postdoc there, had a baby, had a divorce, met the love of my life, and still am in a great relationship with my ex-husband, my son's father, and it's all one big happy family, and we all get together for holidays. And yeah, so that's my sort of even more normal answer. So I don't know, choose your answer.
Choose your adventure, free will and destiny, right? Wow. And you've written a few books, The Calling being the most recent, which is sort of like a program, that 12-week program, if I recall, that helps people sort of engage in their soul's work. And then of course you've mentioned the Premonition, Precognition stuff, which you'd mentioned that at the very beginning of the episode that you are the world's expert on precognition, and my ears peaked up because that's an amazing claim, and you said it with great confidence. And so I definitely want to hear and learn more about that as well. So we can start wherever you feel most called to start.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, so let me explain that claim because it is kind of audacious.
I love it. I love audacious claims.
Yeah, but I've primarily been researching as a scientist precognition for the last 15 years. And while there are other scientists like Dean Radin, of course,
Yep. Had
I've
him on
worked
here
with.
before.
Yeah, and he's a
Yeah.
collaborator of mine, and Stephen Schwartz and many other folks who study precognition. I've been studying it intently and solely for about 15 years, and have had some really powerful success with both researching it but also experiencing it. So what makes me unusual in that realm is I'm both a scientist who studies precognition and is acknowledged worldwide for that, but I'm also an experiencer. So since I was a kid, I've had very detailed dreams about future events that have come to pass. And so that puts me in a situation where I can both teach it from a scientific point of view, as well as an internally focused or phenomenological point of view. Exactly. So that's why I make that audacious claim, and it may be too audacious. I don't know. It's a little awkward to say. As a woman scientist, you're both taught to be humble about your achievements, and at the same time you're taught to broadcast them because everyone else is, and you should be too. And so I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I feel you on that. It's like that's how I feel about podcasting. It's like you're supposed to do all this promotion stuff and and I'm just like, broadcast and promote it, and it's like it just feels like, where do I fit into this? How about I just put out the episodes and let it do what it does organically, but then you don't reach as many people, and then so I can relate to that in a certain way.
Yeah, I know. So my theory is, look, if people are interested, they'll be interested. Maybe they'll buy the book that I wrote with Teresa Chung, Premonition Code, or maybe they'll say, "Oh, that's irritating that she's mentioning her book," and hopefully they won't stop listening.
Well, no, they expect that on this show. I mean, that's what it's all about here. Is getting, anyone. You wrote a book. You poured yourself into this, and I think it's not really debatable that distilling information through a book. It's kind of like our way of downloading. Oh, I'll go ahead and download this person's last 25 years in a few days. It's so, yeah, that's what we are asking from you, is to share your wisdom. And when did you write the Premonition Code?
2018. So the year before I wrote The Calling.
Okay.
And I wrote it with Teresa Chung, who's a best-selling author in the UK. And so it was sort of this US-UK collaboration, which has gone really well. Teresa's fantastic. And so she kind of did the personal, spiritual side, and I did the scientific side. And we presented them both sort of seamlessly in the book. It's pretty neat. So yeah, actually, people can go to thepremonitioncode.com if they want to hear more about that. There's actually a place where you can learn for free to be a precog. We should basically define what precognition is.
Yeah. You took the words. You precogged my next question.
Yeah. So precognition is the scientific term for the capacity to accurately predict future events that should not be predictable according to normal means. Okay, so let's unpack that. The normal means, your brain is a prediction machine. In fact, there's a great book by Dean Guadamano called Your Brain is a Time Machine. Your brain is constantly trying to predict the future events so that you can live a successful life and not get killed by a saber-toothed tiger, right?
Right.
So whatever means that it can use, whether those means are unconscious registrations of the rustling in the leaves, because the tiger is making a rustling in the leaves, but you don't even notice, you just hear them, right? Or whether it's conscious awareness of, wait, I see those paw prints, there might be a tiger around here. Or whether it's expert knowledge of a situation. Well, I've been in this trail before and there's always a tiger around the corner. These kind of things are just the normal means of predicting future events, and they're very important. And then there's this other piece, which is predicting a future event that you don't have any clues about in the present moment. And that's precognition. So the way you test it in the lab is no one on the planet can know what the future event is. And you get the prediction before you determine the future event. So it's like the classic experiment that I did a meta-analysis of with Patrizia Tresoldi and Jessica Utz in 2012. The classic experiments are you check someone's physiology continuously,
Mm-hmm.
and then you periodically show them an image, for instance, of a plane crash, or you might show them an image of a flower.
Yep.
Right. So something emotional versus something neutral. I'm sure you talked with Dean Radin about this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was one of the classic people who did these experiments. And so there's a broad range of them. But anyway, that's the sort of classic experiment. And so the idea is that your body predicts the future event differently, depending on whether that event is emotional versus neutral. And that's borne out statistically to a high degree of statistical significance. And so that kind of thing that happens in physiology also happens in psychology. So people can actually consciously and unconsciously, so you check their unconscious prediction with behavior like button presses. You check conscious predictions. I should finish that sentence. Could consciously or unconsciously predict the future event. But anyway, you check conscious predictions according to their capacity to actually draw, write, speak, act out the future event before it is actually shown to them and before it is selected. People could actually do this if the event is not shown to them in the future. So you could actually predict future events that you never know about. And this becomes interesting. This capacity becomes very interesting for people or communities or organizations that actually need to not reveal what their questions are. So if you're in the intelligence community and you want to ask a question of someone who's skilled at this, but you don't want to reveal what your question is because, for instance, that person might not have a classified clearance.
Right.
Then good for you. You just say, I have this question, please answer it. And if they're skilled, they'll be able to answer it and describe an event in the future and never know what they were being asked. So that's
kind of like remote viewing, right? In a sense.
It is. Oh yeah. Usually you use something like remote viewing to do this. Remote viewing, I've studied remote viewing for probably about 5 or 7 years now, and actually have a team of vetted remote viewers who work on things like this: missing persons, intelligence questions, corporate creativity, stuff like that.
Wow.
So, but so do many other people. Like, so that's not, I mean, I just have to say, like, that's a burgeoning industry. Many people have teams of remote viewers or psychics or intuitives, whatever you want to call them, people who do foresight. I'm specifically focused on precognitive foresight. So I'm really interested in shaping our future in a positive way. And I think that a big piece of shaping our future in a positive way is being able to receive these sort of callings from the future and then act on them. So it's this kind of loop. I don't know if you read Eric Wargo's Time Loops.
No.
Yeah. Wonderful book about how it's about precognition, but it's about how precognition is essentially in a loop with the future. So you're getting the information, you're acting, and you're in this loop. It's almost like how the universe is structured from these loops, which I believe to be the case. Anyway, yeah, where were we?
Wow. Yeah, that's it's really fascinating, and I'm curious, you know, where you think sort of like choice comes into this. I mean, we touched on it a minute ago, free will and destiny. I believe it's all destined from one perspective, because it's all already happened, right? Time is an illusion. It's all happening now on another channel. My 5th birthday party is happening on another channel. I'm just not tuned into it. Future version of me, many are happening, which is where the free will piece comes in, right? So it's, I'm literally choosing, this is the dance with higher self, I believe. Our life is playing out at the corner of free will and destiny, right? It's all destined because it's all already happened. Therefore, you can sort of tap into it vibrationally, like you're describing doing. But hold on, from this moment forward, there are many versions of Julia and Brandon, I believe. And which one which movie we step into determines sort of our co-creative piece and in choosing from to some degree, right? And then of course you have the things that maybe perhaps are hard coded, into every version of Brandon. That's sort of my perspective. So literally, free will and destiny coexist from that perspective, and I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, that's an elegant way to describe it. I want to talk about in that picture that you just described. So I think we have to be very careful because there's an egoic tendency to want to save free will as a concept, regardless of the cost. Because, well, we're just going to have free will because we feel like we have free will. And we can't kind of imagine the idea that that's not the case. And I think we do have free will, but I think that the question is, who's the we? So like we often focus on the free will versus destiny piece of this, but I think the underexplored area is, who is the subject of this? So I do not think that our conscious, waking, daily, egoic, what we call ourselves, myself, I don't think that has free will. And I don't think there's any argument from neuroscience that has free will, in the sense that is created. Your conscious experience of who you are is created by all these unconscious processes. And they are already presenting to your conscious mind what the show is. It's like your conscious experience is a movie. Right. And so it's not like the movie's already written. So it's like, does the movie have free will? Does the projector have free will? Does the projectionist have free will? Right? I don't think the movie has free will. So that's the conscious experience. So what we call ourselves, I don't think we have free will. But if you identify, right? But it's all about, what do you identify as me, as I, or we?
Yeah,
right? If you identify as I, also your unconscious processing, as well as your conscious processing. So what people call their higher self, if that's also you, then, okay, you start to have maybe free will, but you also have to stretch that identification, because it's not just that, right? Because your unconscious processing is actually influenced by your genetics, as well as what you had for breakfast this morning.
Yeah.
Right. So now your breakfast is actually part of your free will. Right. So now, well, the breakfast this morning is influenced by the farmer down the road, or at least where I live, right? Because they do my eggs. And so now it's the farmer down the road and those chickens that are part of my free will. In other words, that's one of the things I point out in the book, The Calling, and actually this is a good segue to that book, is that when you're working with your relationship with God or with the universe, or whatever you want to call it, this sort of thing that's bigger than you, whatever you call it, what you have to recognize is that it is just the case that it has more control than your little individual body over everything that happens to you. Because when you include the entire universe, that's when you've actually got real 100% free will. It's the entire universe is the only thing that has free will, truly free will, that could do anything it wants, because it has all those calculations inside of it.
Right.
So you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so in your picture, which I think is really elegant, it's like saying where the free will is in all of the multiverse, right? That's where the free will is stored. It's in the multiverse, but it's not in one individual path. It's not in an individual choice, because that choice is being affected by by the calculations that the universe has made. In other words, we want it to be that this individual ego has choice, but in fact, what your choice ends up being. So you have the experience of free will, and that's a gift from the universe. It's the experience of free will. And what your choice ends up being is the result of the calculations of the entire universe. So that's why it comes back to marching orders, right? Like the calculations have been made, right?
Okay, so let me. I love this conversation, and so what about the idea that we're not a drop out of the ocean is in the drop, right? I'm sure you've heard this, Rumi.
Oh yeah.
So it's literally, you say the universe has free will, and if the entire universe is within me, is it perhaps so complex and vast that there's more free will than you imagine, based off of these sort of very logical calculations? I mean, I love, it's very elegant the way you're describing and laying it out. And I'm not saying it is or isn't so, I
see what you're saying. I mean, I think you're saying kind of the same thing, and you're sort of drawing a circle around it. And you're saying, so if I identify as the entire universe, then there's like It's free will to the nth degree.
Right.
There's no such thing as anything other than free will at that point.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's a real mind bender to consider, and I suppose at some version, I guess there's also the argument to be made that the version of myself that will actually be able to process the answer is the one that actually has fully processed the answer, has the free will, right?
That's right. There you go.
So there's one in your corner.
Well, it's the same corner.
I know it is. I know. It's really interesting because, I know you just referenced the picture behind me, which people can't see. And you commented on when we first jumped on, and then it led us down a rabbit hole of me like, oh yeah, this picture represents, it's a picture of a incredible tree that's very multidimensional, and all this sort of evolution is happening from the base up through the branches, and I explained to you that it's a representation of this forthcoming project that's really a rebooted project called Industree, spelled Tree, that's reinventing the music industry and other art, creating like conscious art community DAO. And then you explained how your son is going to school and wants, or just finished school. I forget exactly what you said, studying music business, really wants to be disruptive in that space, and how we should connect. And then, we started talking about precognition, and you brought up time travel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, time travel is a part of my story that led me to creating the first version of Industree in 2009, where someone came. I listened to a broadcast.
Wait. You gotta slow this down, because you gotta tell this story clearly, because this is really cool. Slow it down.
Okay. So the entire story, full download of the Industree story, is episode 1532. If you go back into the archives, it's called the Inspired Industree Synchronicity Story, where I share it all. I'm going to try and give this summarized version here. It's definitely more detailed there. But essentially in 2006, I was listening to Coast to Coast AM. I imagine you've heard of it.
Sure.
Sort of the first podcast like this, it was the largest show on the AM dial at one time, and talking about this sort of thing, and, UFOs and everything in between, conspiracies. And so I was listening to this show, and I was really having my own sort of awakening, hardcore. I mean, I had been on a spiritual path for a while, but really tapping into like, oh my gosh, I'm the lead actor in my own private youniverse, right? Like I'm in my own, on my own universe, and therefore I'm the star here, and we all are, and we're just props in each other's movies, I believe. And so I was really feeling that, and the impact that I would have, that did end up coming true with the show, and I feel many things beyond it. And part of it was this idea for reinventing the music industry. And I had my master plan, I've always been, more ideas than I can keep up with. And all of a sudden this person calls into the show as I'm listening to it, and starts, yeah, hi, it's open lines, right? And the guy's like, oh yeah, I'm calling from the year 2063. And of course, Art Bell, I think it was, laughed. I laughed like, okay. And he's like, but the guy was really intelligent, and he's like, oh no, I'm not actually in your time. Time is an illusion. I can communicate backwards. Gave a real smart, sciencey answer. Oh, okay, cool, Mr. Time Traveler. What do you want to talk about? Well, I want to talk about the year 2012. In your time, this is like 2006. It's the end of, a lot of people think it's the end of the world coming, but it's actually the beginning of a new era, of enlightenment and awakening. And okay, Mr. Time Traveler, well, tell me what is the cause of this? Well, one of the contributing factors, and he goes into my idea. There's this guy, he starts this online music platform, and it's all based around the knowing that it's all one. And, he goes from virtual community to permanent community, physical community, and they don't use money there. And it ultimately disrupts the dollar in a good way because it's so successful, and it spreads outside of the community. And, I'm having crazy chills of like, oh my gosh, this is my idea. This is my vision. This guy's saying he's from the year 2063, sharing it. Okay, universe, I don't want to be completely crazy. I need a sign to confirm I'm not losing my mind, right? And I'm not just like spiritual narcissism, the whole thing, the Jesus complex that I think everyone has to go through. because we all are the one, and we have to come to terms with that. I asked for a sign. The guy who called in said his name was Omar. I said, I want to see or hear the name Omar within the next, very quickly as a confirmation. The very next morning, I'm telling my brother about what happened to me on the phone. He's back east. I'm driving. I stop at a stoplight. I'm in front of a place called Omar's Print Shop, right? As I'm telling him about it. Fast forward 3 years, I have my first company with like 25 employees. We're hitting some walls. I'm, frustrated. I should be doing industry, right? This is my calling. This is, I went down and meditated in the courtyard and said, okay, universe, if I'm meant to stop everything, I don't know how I'll fund it. I don't know how I'll put the pieces together, but I'll trust, I want to see or hear the name Omar again, right? 3 years later. That afternoon, picked my son up from school. He begs me to see a friend he hadn't seen in 2 years who moved away. I agree. Pick this kid up. First thing, kid gets in the car. My son's name is Bradley. Hey, Bradley, it's so good to see you. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. My dad took me to this bird shop called Omar's. Omar this, Omar that. He said Omar like 20 times, right? At dinner a few hours later, did I tell you about Omar's yet? I'm like, yeah, like 25 times.
That's pretty cute. I just have to say, like the first time it was a print shop and the second time it's a bird. It's like the print shop is like the tree, right? And then the bird lands in the tree. It's like
that's a really good, wow. And in this picture behind me, oh my gosh, it has birds. You couldn't see it, but there's birds going all the way up the branches, which to me represents, there's a book called Return of the Bird Tribes. It says it's a prediction of the future that will come back at a certain time and come together, the bird tribes, to use music to create the awakening on the planet. And it's by King Carey. It's a brilliant. So you pointing that out, I can't believe I've never made that connection. I'm so good at making connections. And wow, that's a good one. Okay, so cool. I'm almost to the end of this. So, like I said, it gets more details, but this is the high level. So now, fast forward, I launch industry. It's like MySpace meets Spotify before Spotify. I had my own token called Blooms before cryptocurrency that people would get paid out in, and it grew to a few thousand users. Struggling with the financial side of it, in a little bit of investment I had was pulled out. My brother was my partner. His girlfriend committed suicide. It was like some tragedy that struck. And so I ended up like frustrated about the money piece. I need to manifest the money to do this right. I put it on hold and I started a travel company. Spiritual Breadcrumbs led me there. It became an Inc. fastest growing private company within a few years, 100 plus employees. I mean, it was a tiger by the tail. Fast forward to a year and a half ago, I've been in that industry, started a podcast, all these other things. I never got back to industry. Okay. That was another timeline. My friend starts talking to me like, Brandon, you were just ahead of your time. You can use, blockchain technology now, Ask for a sign again. I didn't ask for Omar. I was at a festival, but with my friends, we were kind of doing this thing to asking for a sign, and a dragonfly landed on my nose and stayed there for like 2 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I was like, okay, this is a big undertaking, but I'm going to do it. I go and walk around the festival and am like, I run into a friend who I haven't seen in a long time and say, yeah, I just made a big decision to go back to this, this project that I, thought was kind of behind me. And apparently I'm supposed to bring it back. And I told him about it and he goes, oh my gosh, I want to be involved. I want to help. First thing I'm going to do is set you up with a meeting with a friend that I think can help. His name is Omar. And I go and sit down with Omar a few days later. He's like 70 some years old, like this very quirky, fun character. He was very involved in the Superman movies in the 80s. He's a movie guy. And he's like, hey, I'm Omar. Nice to meet you. I'm a bit of a time traveler. And, and I'm like, wow, what's happening? So that's sort of like the very high level of the industry story. As I mentioned to you, I got this painting maybe 6 months ago, and it felt very much like, oh my gosh, this is symbolically industry. And my plan is in 2023 to really start putting energy in. I tried to kind of put energy into it a little sooner, and it hasn't been the time yet due to other things on my plate. But I see that clearing up in 2023 and really dedicating a lot of energy to it. And
Wow.
So that's my sort of time traveler tie-in.
Wait, I gotta ask, was the guy who said he was a time traveler, the old guy that you met, did you ask him if he was the Art Bell guy?
Yeah, he was not.
Okay, but still, but who cares? Maybe he
Yeah,
was.
yeah, right? Right. I mean, there's some, it doesn't really matter, right? It's like the breadcrumbs are so laid out, it's just like ridiculous.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing. I love that story. So my impression is this stuff happens and these are your marching orders, and you could say things like, well, I'm going to get to it in 2023.
Yep.
But our conversation, and the fact, by the way, also the dragonfly, which is another bird metaphor.
That's and I just ran into my roommate minutes ago before our recording with his brand new dragonfly tattoo on his chest that I got to see and comment on.
Follow the white rabbit. Yeah. So it's like I think that the universe may have a different opinion than you do about when this is going to start happening again. So that's just a thought.
You may be you know what? If anything, I'm learning, I'm maybe a slow learner, is that, what I think, in time frames, how rarely I'm correct. So my intention and aim and vision with from my limited perspective is in 2023, I'll be able to start putting some energy to it, but you may very well be right. It could.
Yeah, it's not dependent on the energy you put to it. That's the mistake. So the mistake is
that's an interesting, that gets into our debate, right? Like, how much say do I get? I don't know.
Not a lot. Yeah. Well, we got to hook you up with Matt Rad, right?
Who's that?
Oh my God. So Matt Rad would be all over industry. So Matt Rad is probably the most influential producer, podcaster who's trying to create a different vibe in the music industry.
Really?
He's like a voice for a new generation there. You have to listen to his podcast, and we got to hook you up. I think I know someone who can hook you up, and you got to have this conversation.
I would love to. Obviously it's one of those things. It's funny. I think back to the 2006 call, and it was mind blowing to me because I was really processing at that time. Like, I can't share my ideas. Someone will take them. And, and so how does this person even know my big secret idea? And now I couldn't be less that way when it's like, what's for me will be for me. This isn't about me. This is about,
That's right.
So I'd love to talk to Matt Rad about it. And the sum is greater than the equal parts. And how could I contribute, and how could we benefit each other? And
totally. Yeah, let's make that happen. Yeah, it's once you get to the place. Also, this is one of the key pieces. This is why I ended up starting. So we should briefly talk about the calling, because it's kind of the cornerstone of all this kind of way of thinking. And also it's why it's the book that you saw on the bookshelf that made you want to talk to me. And so what it is as a scientist, I've noticed that this is kind of an understatement. So here we go. As a scientist, I've noticed that we do not really teach students the beauty and wonder and awe and mysticism that is inherent within the scientific method. We do a horrible job of that. So people end up thinking, and including scientists sometimes end up thinking, but not the best ones, end up thinking that science is keeping to a set of facts and doing experiments in line with those facts, and then rationalizing the results of those experiments based on current models of the universe. But in fact, that is not what science is. What science is it's a conversation with the natural world about what is true. And you're literally asking a series of questions of like, all right, are you like this? And you're trying to ask very good questions in very precise ways. Depending on your field, the precision will vary and the way you ask the question will vary, but you'll ask as precise questions as you can within that field in the way that you can within that field. And then you will get responses back. And it's like orgasmic. It's this mystical communion.
It's a scientific Ouija board.
Yeah, except it's better than that, because you're part of the Ouija board, right? So it's a relationship with God that you're exploring. It's this dance with the universe that you're exploring, and it's so powerful and so intimate and so mystical that we keep that part quiet because we think it's not scientific, but in fact, it's the essence of science.
Wow.
And so what I wanted to do was take the scientific method, not the facts that have been developed by science, which are important too, and of course always change. So there's that. But anyway, but the actual process of science, and apply it to ourselves, because the deal with science is the scientific process. It's so beautiful. It's so elegant. And we're part of the universe. We can apply these questions to ourselves. We can do a series of experiments with ourselves to address questions about ourselves as part of the universe. How do we work? What is our operations manual? How do you describe the rules of my own behavior so that I can better understand myself and live a life that actually brings forward my gifts in community and for the betterment of the world? And so that's what the calling is about. That's what those 12 weeks are about. So it has 3 sections. One is about discovering your purpose, your as I call it, your soul's work. And the second section is about energizing that in relationship with other people. And the last one is about the last 4 weeks are about engaging that in the universe. So working with your relationship with God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, to engage that and actually recognize that you're kind of having to say, this is my calling. And frankly, like, I'm not in charge. And here we go, And so, and I've shortened that into a 30-day audio course, because I know that 12 weeks seems like a long time to people. So there's a 30-day audio course. I think you have the link to it there. I don't know when.
Yeah, we'll share that.
We'll share all that. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So, so I'm just sort of desperate to get people to see the beauty of science and use this method to see their just true beauty. We have so much power and beauty. We do contain the universe, like you said. That's a beautiful way to put it. And yet the universe goes through us. It's not an egoic containing. It's right. A surrendering containing.
That's the word. I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Rudd's Gene Keys.
Yes.
But for my life's purpose, I can't remember if it's my life's purpose, life's work, I believe, the highest city is surrender. And yes. It's eerily like what you're describing. As how they work. It's your shadow, and then your gift, and then your city, your ultimate expression of your potential. For those who aren't aware, and I had Richard Rudd on years ago. You can search him on positivehead.com and check it out. He's amazing, and the book's amazing, and the modality is amazing, and so inspired. Seeming it was supposedly, sort of like channeled, downloaded from him many years back. But it basically was like you come to the point of, the shadow of it is using words, right? Or not the shadow of it in general. I forget the number even. It's all about using words to, and the shadow manipulate and use others and get what I want from them by the power, the power of words. And
the
then
power
the
of
gift,
patter.
Yeah. And then the gift is, using that same power to help everyone around me. And then the city is like, hold on, realizing you're essentially part of something so much bigger that all you can do is surrender to it. And
you are being
that's essentially
used.
what you're saying.
You are being run. You are being driven. You are being used. Yeah. And that's beautiful. Instead the fear that people have is, so here's, it sounds so crazy if you think about it, that we have this idea that, I have to be in control, because only if I'm in control will it really work out.
Yeah, right.
The universe isn't smart enough, even though the universe includes me.
There's some things to it though. It's like the oak tree is only, the acorn's only going to become the oak tree if the right conditions are created. So I can have this is where it's such a nuanced thing here we're talking about, but if I am, instead of meditating, doing yoga, going to the gym, eating healthy, focusing on conversations like this in my life, and I decide to do, blow and go get hookers and see what I can steal from those around me, there can be 2 very different Brandons that emerge in potential. So that's the part that's tricky, you know. It's
well, I don't know that it's tricky. So
you're saying I'm not really choosing; it's being chosen.
I'm saying it's being chosen for you. So this is a topic that every single person wants to resist, and I understand why, because we want it to be that our little ego selves are in charge of these choices. We want that. We want it so bad because we think that we're so friggin' smart. Yeah. But you know how disastrous things, much, much worse things would be if our little ego selves were in charge of these choices. I mean, it's just like, so I don't know if you know about Advaita or Wayne Lickerman. You can go to advaita.org, advaita.org, if you're interested in learning more. But he used to do blow. He was a huge coke addict, alcoholic. He is an alcoholic, drug addict. And he tells a story about how one day he did so much, like he could not get high, and he was struck sober, and his choice was to take more coke and to drink more and to try to have a huge party because, like, what the fuck, he couldn't get high, you know. That was his choice, but he couldn't choose what happened. What happened was he couldn't get high. He was completely sober. I see. And that shifted him into a teacher of Advaita, which is a non-dual tradition that teaches that that you have a choice, but you don't. That you always have a choice, but you don't dictate what happens as a result of that choice. You can choose, right?
That's the free will.
Well, that's the
how you perceive it. Well, what about how you perceive the happening?
I don't know that. So again, I get that people want it to be that you have this. There's just no evidence that we do, and I get it. It's such a human trait, and we're built. I don't think we have any free will about our desire to have free will either. So so it's like, but it's so much more powerful to recognize that even the experiences that you claim that you choose that you're having are being given to you.
Well, you know, and I can find my solace in, like, okay, even if I'm not choosing, even though it feels like I am, but I'm not, the one that is choosing is me too. So there.
Yeah. Well, as long as you identify with the entire universe, then that's correct. That's correct. Right. But then you also recognize that as the entire universe, you're doing all the calculations that supported an experience of you feeling really depressed one day, or someone committing suicide. Like, those are all supported by all these calculations, right? So it's not the fantasy that you could just have pleasure for the rest of your life and no pain is just a good thing to let go of.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize you didn't. I don't believe we came for that. I mean, it's like you know, the higher the branches, the deeper the roots. I think it's necessary. This evil is lived backwards kind of idea. Like, you know, the darkness is the shadow, and all these things are actually very useful tools for the light. It's necessary, that contrast, for it to exist.
Well, there can be no light without that. What are we even talking about? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I'm also curious, you know, your thoughts on intuition. You know, I've heard it said and agree with the idea that intuition is the highest form of intelligence and that we can access. And, you know, because all these calculations that are being made outside of our little, you know, monkey mind's ability to calculate, it's like, you know, are being given to us in a sense. And for us to use or not use. And of course, the more you work the intuitive muscle, you know, the stronger it gets, kind of idea. We all have heard that. So I'm curious, where you think intuition comes into all of this.
Well, you know, what we call intuition. So I have a good collaborator and good friend, Carmen Medina, who spent 30 or so years at the CIA. And she is a wonderful thinker. She thinks about thinking. And she says that that's the work of the intelligence community, is to think about thinking, which I think they need to do more of. But I think she does too. But in any case, she wrote a beautiful article about intuition and intelligence. And I think that she is right when she says, what do we call intuition? We call intuition insight when we don't understand logically how we got there, right? Well, so I don't know that it's the highest form of intelligence because I don't know what that really means. We need all the forms of intelligence that we can get. So I was just like, let's not just uninclude any of them and let's say they're all great, right? We need musical intelligence, emotional intelligence.
Sure.
We need social intelligence. We need creative intelligence. We need intuition. We need, we need all of them, and we need all of them at different times and at different amounts. And each person is good at a different array of them, and that's all important and good. But I think it's not the highest form, but I think it's the first form of intelligence. In other words, there's a famous book by Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winning economist, who wrote a book. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he talks about the system one, he calls it, which is the intuitive, fast mind. And then system two is the more conscious, analytical, rationalizing mind. He's kind of downplayed the importance of intuition and spoke about how, that causes a lot of bias. But what he didn't say, and that was a little frustrating to me, because actually the intelligence community and the academic community started saying, oh my gosh, we have to be so much more analytical. We're trusting our intuition. It's a bad thing. But the question that wasn't really addressed well in the book, and sorry, sometimes I just have to say things. Sometimes I have to critique Nobel laureates, and it's okay. They can stand it. They've got
it happens to the best of us,
Exactly. But the obvious question that was not really covered in the book is, what is the relationship between system one and system two? Now, every psychologist knows the relationship between system one and system two, and so does every neuroscientist. And the relationship is that system one, the intuitive system, comes first, and it creates system two. So any bias that you have in system one goes to system two and is then rationalized about. And so, in fact, we know now that given the same amount of time, given a short amount of time, system one will answer a question more accurately than system two. So why is that? Because it's the first layer. It's closest to the actual raw data of the physical world. It's closest to all the raw data that we're unconscious of. It can process, 16 factors at once, whereas system two, the analytical mind, can process 4 factors at once. So it's not that it's the highest form, it's that it's the most native form. It's the most natural form. It's the foundational form. It's the roots. It's the roots of the tree. It's the roots of the tree. Yeah.
Very well said. I love that explanation. And speaking of Nobel, Prize winners, what did you think about? I mentioned to you, I don't post a whole lot on social media, but I just happened to share yesterday this cover of the Scientific American from last month. The universe is not locally real, and the physics Nobel Prize winners proved it.
Yep.
So I think that's a pretty exciting thing to be, now on Scientific American, talking about, this idea of that things are not only locally influenced by things in their immediate surrounding and so forth. And so, just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So it's either the case that causal influences can be non-local, which is that argument, or that localism, the idea that things are like billiard balls affecting each other in the local environment, is globally not real, globally not true. And I think you could argue both ways, and there's I guess a subtle distinction. So either in one case, it's that in some cases there can be this connection, and the stronger case is the entire universe is like that, right? That's how everything works.
Yep.
I am super excited about that development because I do think there's a lot of folks who you could say deserve a Nobel Prize. I don't think that matters so much. I think what matters is, what is the Nobel Committee trying to steer? This is a group of scientists who meet to try to steer the future of what matters in science.
Yeah.
So they try to award people who are thinking along the lines of where they think the future is going.
Yeah.
I think this is a signal that says we really need to get it, that this idea of localism is no longer tenable. This idea of local causes and the physical universe behaving just like we think it does with our folk wisdom when we watch billiard balls on a table. Like, we have to let go of that. Stop it, please. And so that's the future. I mean, the future capacity of humanity to adapt to the UFO experience, to psychic phenomenon, to these tools that we can use to actually understand ourselves and connect with each other and bring together essentially an unconditionally loving planet, which is where we're headed. It's going to rely on our capacity to get this, and it has been 100 years since this has been proposed, right? This is and now it's been tested, and it's like, okay, this is really
we're gonna accept this finally.
It
explains all the intuitive knowings and and all the connection at a distance, the spooky action at a distance. It's like it supports the mountains of information of mothers who intuited when their son, like my friend, when he cut off his finger, his mother called him, and there's a reason. They're connected. And the other piece of this, like the beginning of that article when I looked at yesterday, was also talking about also the idea, of objects having definite properties independent of observation. As Einstein famously said, hold on, or do you really believe the moon is not there when you're not looking at it? Kind of like, and so that's the other piece of this that is just like, hold on, they're not just locally, influenced. And if consciousness isn't involved in observation, then it's in a state of quantum superposition and probability. Which is another intense thing for the scientific community to be talking about so readily.
Yeah. Well, and I think the leap that physicists kind of privately make, and we had a Tilt, my nonprofit, sponsored a meeting called Quantum Time Machines at University of San Diego, where we had physicists from around the world come and talk about trying to build a time machine process. And those physicists, so we could talk about that at sometimes, but those physicists got it that non-locality in space can be equivalent to non-locality in time, right? So when you're thinking about consciousness, when you're thinking about these kind of effects like that, I'm serious when I say things like being called from the future is equally as influential as being pushed from the past. Being pulled from the future and pushed from the past are both active in the now. They're both active forces in the now because of non-locality in time, right? So you have to consider the multiple dimensions of that non-locality in order to take home the real implications of those results, I think.
Yeah. Wow. So amazing, all to ponder and consider. And if you would just share, I know we're coming up on our time stop here, but your nonprofit, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. So I had started that, and then I went into the calling. The reason I went into the calling is through my work with the book, The Calling, I realized I needed to start this nonprofit, and that was my next marching order. So this is about a recognition that there's some really important relationship between the scientific reality of unconditional love as a force in the universe and time travel. And it may sound to some people like those don't make sense, but I think they do. I'm working with a physicist, another physicist. I'm not a physicist. I'm trained in cognitive neuroscience, although I do have that appointment in the physics department because of this conference and because of my work in physics. But I'm working with a physicist who's actually trained in physics to try to understand the relationship between what are the mathematical rules of unconditional love, as if we imagine it as a force in the universe. What does it look like, and what is that relationship with time? Because there's some kind of thing where if you get into a state of unconditional love, there's a timelessness. And I actually tested this with a couple experiments on precognitive remote viewing, and people who were untrained in precognitive remote viewing were significantly more accurate when they were in a state of unconditional love. And I then replicated this recently. And so there's something about that feeling, the human response to the force of unconditional love, in which we feel unconditionally loved and unconditionally loving, that relates to this capacity to get information across time. There's something about that. So when it comes to informational time travel, I wrote a blog post called How to Avoid the Time Wars, which goes into my research on this stuff and how, in fact, to avoid time wars, which sounds crazy, but that's okay. Just read the article and you can decide for yourself. I'm
looking at a quote at this moment and I'm like, could this play in? It's like, the one who avoids the conflict to keep the peace starts a war inside himself. And it just happened to be right in my face at this moment as you're talking about war. So
that's like, really interesting.
Maybe that's a piece of the puzzle.
Well, it's about our relationship with our future selves. So if currently we don't trust our future selves, and so we can actually end up in a time war with our future selves.
Wow.
And so, but that can change. So anyway, it felt to me like there needed to be this nonprofit. Very quickly, we got a large grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to create software to support people in unconditionally loving themselves through time. And so we call that Time Machine. You can go to timemachine.love and try it out. It's free for anyone. We're working now with the U.S. military to try to get it specifically for veterans and people who are even active service people who are dealing with military trauma and learning to love themselves. And so it turns out we tested it, of course, so because I'm a scientist, I like to test things. So we tested it and wrote a paper about it. So there's a lot there. You can find out more. We have a conference actually coming up this Friday, which is our first inaugural Love and Time conference with some kind of amazing people who are going to be speaking there. So should I give that
yeah,
link?
Please. Yeah, please.
Okay. It's tinyurl.com. So
I'll paste this too in the show notes.
Okay, so it's tinyurl.com/tilt2022 CONF. So
and this is online, or it's in
the conference is going to be online. Yeah, anyone can join.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. And it's in support of. Did I catch that right? It's in support of this timemachine.love project.
That's one of our projects. That's our most active project right now, but we're seeking funding for a gaze project where we have a prototype for an app that allows people to gaze at each other in unconditional love. And then we have another project called Temperaceuticals. We have which is like a healing community around the world. Anyway, there's a bunch of projects. They're really fun. There's so much depth there, but I don't want to people can come to the conference and learn more.
Yeah.
Or go to the website, loveandtime.org, and you can learn more.
Okay, great. Yeah, and just give me all the links, and I'll make sure and put these in the show notes. So.
Okay, cool. And then there's a meditation for your people that I did for your listeners specifically. I was getting into the B-52's song Love Shack, and I thought we should make a place in the mental space where we could go and like get together and dance.
Little place where we can get together.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I love the way your brain works. It's like that's such a funny, cool, interesting. So the Love Shack meditation as well, we're going to share with you guys. So super cool. Well, I know we're coming up on a time stop here, ironically. And I'd love to hear any story of synchronicity, serendipity, positive paranormal story that you feel inspired to share.
What came into my mind when you said that was my husband, Brooks Palmer. He had a double lung transplant in 2013.
Wow.
Because really, really bad illness, and he's fine now, by the way. But we definitely thought he was going to die.
Great.
And but when he had too much of the paralytic, they gave him, because of complications, they gave him so much of the paralytic, they didn't know if he was going to be conscious again or if he was going to be able to move his body. And when he was coming out of the medically induced coma, I was just by his bedside, just waiting for hours and hours and days for him to move. And one time I decided I'm going to sing a song that he wrote for me and see if that stimulates something. So I started singing this song, and the moment I did, he rose his eyebrows, which is his characteristic flirting move. And then I was just like, woo. And then so sometimes I get these things
coma flirting,
coma flirting. And then I got this, like, what I call a heart text, which is like my heart just gives me information, and it's like I received a text message through my heart. And it was a heart text from him, and he said, "I'll do it again at the end." And I didn't know what that meant. So I kept singing the song, and then in the very last verse of the song, he did it again.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, there we go.
Heart text.
Gosh, and then I knew it was going to be fine.
Wow. You are amazing. I have so enjoyed this. Is there anything else that you want to get out and share? Remind people of best way to connect with you before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, they know everything. loveandtime.org is the best way to find me, or on LinkedIn. But I have a message for you.
Ooh, okay.
Okay.
I like that.
Sorry, sometimes that happens. And the message for you is to notice the beauty in your own words. I think you appreciate the beauty and sort of the gold in the words of others, and I think you definitely use words, but like this piece that you call The Shadow has this unbelievable sort of silver lining, there's gold lining, and it just feels to me like, yeah, honor the gift, you know.
Oh, I think that is a beautiful statement and offering and reflection. Thank you so much for that. And, you know, I've done a lot of episodes, and this has been up there as one of my most fun. Yeah, I just really, really enjoy you, the way your mind works and the way you interact. And so I'd love to have you back on sometime. It sounds like, I mean, there's so much more I want to ask you about and talk about. And so perhaps we can do a round 2 at some point in the near future if you're up for it.
I would love it. And let's get some music industry people on here.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, that, my friends, is what we got for you today. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves, incredible hearts, and your future self, past self, bringing it all to the table. It's been such a joy. And I do have one final question for you, and it is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Julia Mossbridge?
Unconditional love.
What has one condition but no conditions?
Love.
Unconditional love. I have a fun story with that riddle that came to me many years ago, and I got the answer. Someone was on this like chat roulette, this old thing where you'd randomly connect with people's, on web. You just click and you just random people. I don't know if it still exists or not. This is like 10 years ago. And I came to one and he had like the satanic Bible and pentagrams and all this stuff. And it was like, what has one condition but no conditions? And I instantly, or what has no conditions but one, I forget how he phrased it, which one he said first, but I instantly knew the answer, unconditional love. And I was like, unconditional love. And he's like, oh my God. And he took off the mask and took all the props down. He goes, I've been waiting. I said I wasn't going to like take any of this down and stop being on the site until someone got the answer. And it was just like, it was a funny moment.
That's awesome. See, there's your golden words.
Yeah, right. Oh. Thank you, Julia. You are such a gem, and such a pleasure connecting with you. And if you're up for it, we'll definitely bring you back, because I just feel like there's so much more interesting to pull out of you. So,
Same.
yeah. And
all right.
And all of you, thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time, journey well.